Good evening, everybody. Here we are in the middle of August, and I hope you have had a chance to enjoy the nice weather, or maybe it's been too hot for you. And now we're in, I don't know, it's changeable all the time, isn't it? A bit up and down. So tonight's talk, I decided to talk on this topic of FODMAPs. Some of you will be very familiar with this term. Others, it might be new to you. It might be something somebody might have recommended to you because it could be helpful. So I thought I'd just explain about what FODMAPs actually is, why it may be relevant to you, why it might have been recommended, how it can be helpful, but actually why I don't recommend this as a long-term dietary approach at all. Now, when we talk about FODMAPs, it's not a diet, so it is something that's recommended for people who are having digestive symptoms. So I'm going to go into a bit of detail about that tonight. Just to remind you that I'm doing this practically every Tuesday. If anybody would like to suggest a different time to suit them better, then please say. Since January, I've been doing them at 6 o'clock on a Tuesday night. Very difficult to find a time that suits everybody, but they are recorded if you want to listen just at another time. And and these are also put into my YouTube channel, which is called Peyton Principles Natural Health. So you'll find my podcasts are loaded, not my podcast, these Facebook Lives are being loaded up into my YouTube channel as well. So great to see if you can join me live tonight, and thanks for watching. And if you're watching later on, thank you for watching later on as well. So FODMAPs, what exactly is FODMAPs? Now, for those of you who are on a FODMAPs diet or possibly have tried a FODMAPs diet, will probably recommended this by your GP, possibly by a dietitian. If you got to see a dietitian, or you may have been handed some information by a GP. And it's when you have experienced digestive symptoms that may be diagnosed as actual IBS symptoms, or maybe you've experienced symptoms of abdominal bloating, cramping, potentially having loose stools or varying bowel movements, then you may well have been advised to try a FODMAPs diet, because there's been research to show just how helpful it is in alleviating symptoms. So that's all well and good. I saw some sponsored Facebook posts. It comes up a lot actually on my Facebook feed, probably because of the subject matter that I talk about a lot, and talking about alleviating and your IBS symptoms. And I saw that it talked about FODMAP meal plans that are linked to FODMAPs. So I just thought, well, this is a really useful thing. I get a lot of clients come to me having been on a FODMAPs diet. They may still be on it. They may have had some relief, but they're not getting the sort of relief from their symptoms that they're actually looking for. But over time, I'm actually trying to wean clients off the FODMAPs diet, and I'll explain why that is. So FODMAPs has been around now for a number of years. I think it's been around probably for at least 8 years now. It's been brought in by the dietitian community, and as I said, it was brought about through research that showed, but following this sort of dietary approach, it would help to eliminate IBS type symptoms. And what it is it's to do with certain types of carbohydrates that when they are digested, when they're going through the digestive tract, they can lead to increased bloating and increased gas, or an increased risk of having sort of diarrhea or looser stools. And when we talk about these carbohydrates, it's not so much just talking about your potatoes and rice, that type of thing. It's a certain classification, and this is where the word FODMAP, which is in capital letters, came from. It's types of short chain carbohydrates. They're sort of tend to be quite simple types of sugars, which are called fermentable oligo, di, monosaccharides, and polyols. And there are lots of different types of foods, and included in this, you've got milk sugars, which are lactose. You've got quite a lot of fructose foods, and you've got a lot of other foods that are linked to the typical vegetables that you would typically eat. So garlic, onions, broccoli, cabbage, Brussels sprouts. And then, of course, if you're a vegan, you're going to be eating a lot of things like pulses and lentils. These also fall into these categories. So you've got leeks as well, asparagus. You've got quite a wide range of what I consider to be really important vegetable, high fiber type foods that are being taken out of your diet. The reason why they are shown to help alleviate your symptoms if you have digestive symptoms is because some of these simple sugars tend to draw water into the stools, hence the potential tendency to having looser stools, or you're getting certain strains of microbes, gut bacteria, that can feed off these sugars. And they feed off their sugars, they ferment from these sugars, and in return they create a lot of gas, and that's where you're going to get the bloating and the discomfort and potentially the cramping that goes with it as well, the huge discomfort that goes on where you increase. Clients say to me they increase the dress size as the day goes on. It also includes wheat and rye. That doesn't mean it's to do with gluten. It's to do with the actual sugars in the grains themselves that also have this same impact when they're in the gut and in the colon. So as a short-term effect, if you're taking away the food that is feeding certain strains of bacteria, you can see why it's going to alleviate symptoms, because you're taking away that source of food for them. You're taking away that source of food, and therefore they can't feed off it, and therefore they can't produce all that gas. So it's excellent, and I appreciate why anyone who's experiencing those symptoms wants to get that relief. You want to reduce that constant discomfort and potential pain that you're going through on a day-to-day basis. So it is highly effective for certain people. As I said, for some people, the digestive symptoms that they're experiencing, they're not due to one cause. So that's why I will have clients who have tried FODMAPS, but they're not getting the relief they were hoping for, and they've still got other symptoms that are going on, and so they come to me looking for this big full picture that I can take into account, the big holistic picture, look at the whole digestive tract and see what's going on. So that's why it was devised, and why taking those foods out of the diet brings about huge relief for many people. So that appears to be a win, doesn't it? However, it's not really a diet that is supposed to be followed for a long period of time. It's supposed to be followed for a short period of time and then slowly reintroduce some of these foods. I think the problem is that people are left to their own devices and find they get relief and stay on this diet, and they think, well, it's easy, I've got my list of foods here, I know what to avoid, I can manage my diet around avoiding those types of foods, and that's great. So I'll just carry on avoiding those foods because that's taking away at least some of the discomfort that I was feeling before, or at least some of the inconvenience, particularly if you may get a tendency towards loose bowels that you were experiencing. So people tend to stay on this for forever, potentially, or for far too long. It was devised as being a very short-term, 8 weeks maximum type of diet to follow, and not follow it for a long period of time. Why do I not feel it's the right thing to do? And it's going back to having an understanding of these different types of bacteria that can find their way and take up space within the colon. Whether we think of it, I sometimes think of it like a car parking garage where, you know, you've got every car parking space filled along the walls of the colon, and you want those spaces filled as much as possible with those beneficial and good bacteria. But if it's allowed to develop, then too many of those spaces are going to be taken up with the wrong strains of bacteria. And in this instance, the types of bacteria that are tending to reside there are the ones that produce are like hydrogen sulfide producers, they're methane producers, hence this gas and this discomfort. They're not the ones that we want there. They shouldn't be residing there. When I do stool testing with clients now, I can see the types of strains that are quite common that start to appear, and we want to keep those in check. Of course, you can try and keep those in check by reducing the types of food that you're potentially going to feed them. But what you're also not doing at that same time is helping to build back and crowd out those ones that you don't want there. You want to try and fill those spaces with these good, beneficial strains of bacteria, which of course there are many. We want to fill those spaces with those. But by taking out these really highly beneficial fiber-rich foods from our diet, of which we need as much diversity as possible. It's not just about fiber per se, it's about all the other plant compounds, polyphenol compounds, flavonoids, as well as the fiber content itself. We want as many different types as we possibly can eat in order to enable these beneficial strains of bacteria, of which there are many, to thrive. And by allowing them to build up in population, it can help to crowd out the other ones. So the long-term impact of following a FODMAPS diet is you're alleviating your symptoms. However, your long-term effect is likely to have a detrimental impact on helping to nurture and encourage all these beneficial strains of bacteria that we need to thrive. And it's not unusual, again, when I see stool testing results in the company that I use, that there could be negligible amounts of bifidobacterium, for example, and other strains, lactobacillus, and other strains that we need to see there. There may be negligible amounts. So we need to do all we can to be building up levels of those in the colon so that we can crowd out these other ones. And so my approach is helping through the digestive symptoms, working with the symptoms that I'm presented with, having an understanding of what is going on beyond just what's happening within the colon and in the gut itself, in the large intestines, and providing that support the whole way through so that we can start to build back these fibrous foods that are absolutely crucial to our health overall, way beyond the gut. Full of these plant compounds that not just feed beneficial bacteria, that are helping to provide beneficial impact to our cells, antioxidant effects as well, across our whole body that we need. And so I very much like to move away from that with my clients, step-by-step approach, and start to add them back in. So if you have been following FODMAPS, you would want to start thinking about what can you start adding back in, step by step, gently and slowly, one by one, not rushing it, trying to add small amounts back into your diet and see whether you can now tolerate them. But it's very, very important to really increase this diversity. The one thing that I would say is not essential when I look at this FODMAP list of foods is the dairy, the cow's milk dairy. It's the milk, sugar, lactose that can be problematic. It's not something that I commonly have in my diet, and I often come up with alternatives for my own clients to follow. The lactose, again, one of the problems with lactose is that as mammals, we're the only adult mammals to be consuming dairy beyond infancy. So we tend to start lacking the enzymes to be breaking it down effectively, hence why it passes through to the colon and starts causing problems. But in turn, these beneficial bacteria, known as lactic acid bacteria, when we've got a plentiful supply of them, can actually help to break down milk sugars. So for many people, a small amount in the diet is not a problem usually. However, we find it in too many foods, don't we? If we're eating milk and cheese and yogurts, then we're tending to eat too much of it on a day-to-day basis. And equally, you know, I'm not one to be eliminating whole types of foods out the diet. But again, you know, it is worth thinking carefully about your intake of wheat in the diet, whether it's wheat per se or whether it is actually gluten that may be a little bit of a problem for you. Those foods are not the ones I'd be rushing to add back in. However, I would want to be thinking about the cauliflowers and the broccoli and the mushrooms and eating things like plums and apples and pears. As I said, you want to be rushing to add these foods back into your diet. But to me, there are so many beneficial things about apples and the pectin content, which acts as a prebiotic to the gut, that is very, very important, that shouldn't really be taken out of our diet long term. But if you are following this diet for a short period of time, you know, do make sure you keep up levels of things like brown rice and oats. And you can be eating carrots and green beans and berries, which are a fantastic source of these important compounds like polyphenols. So keeping things like that up is very, very important. So I hope that that's given you an overview why FODMAPs are recommended, what it actually means, why you wouldn't want to be on it for a lengthy period of time, and why it's really important to look at ways to start slowly reintroducing some of those FODMAP type fibre-rich foods back into your diet to help change the composition of the bacteria in your gut. So we're favouring those beneficial ones to crowd out the ones that we don't really want residing there. So thank you for your time. I hope you found this interesting tonight. I'll be back next Tuesday, the 25th, I think it is, next week, 25th of August, for my next instalment. And I hope you have a really good week. I hope the weather is kind to us all through the rest of August. Not too hot, not too cold, plenty of sunshine for us to enjoy before the school holidays are over and we start to hopefully get back to some sort of more of a normality going forward in our lives. So take care, everybody. Hope you all have a good week.